Hey everyone, welcome back to the Out of Spec podcast. Hope you're doing well today. I'm your host, Francie, hosting another conversation with a great guest in a minute about electrification. And specifically, over here, we talk about electrification of passenger vehicles a lot. The kinds that you may be lucky enough to be leasing or purchasing off of a dealer's own parking lot or on the automaker's website, clicking confirm purchase and waiting for that delivery date. Either way, it's really cool to see how we're electrifying the world personally. I really find it interesting. But what is also really, really, really exciting and a place where a ton of impact is commercial fleets. Fleet electrification from light to medium to heavy duty commercial fleets. There is room for electrification and innovation, but we do have to rethink things. And that is what today's episode is about. I have a guest coming on in a second, Ali Javidan, founder and CEO of Range Energy. When we talk about electrification of fleets, we think of maybe semi trucks and electrifying the cab, the thing that really pulls the whole system, all the freight forward. But what if instead we looked at the back? And what about electric propulsion? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let's plug in for that interview with Ali. This episode is made possible by the support we get from Fort Collins Kia. If you are in the market for any electric Kia, not only do they never add market adjustments, they will deliver your car to you anywhere in the 48 contiguous states for out-of-spec viewers. More information in the link in the show notes. So, like I said, today we're speaking with Ali Javidan, founder and CEO of Range Energy. And I do want to give you just one heads up, y'all. I'm so sorry, but my audio is a bit funky on this one. We've done our very best. It was kind of quite messed up. My apologies there. I dropped the ball, but Ali's is great. So while I ask good questions, I might sound a little weird than I usually do, but trust me, it's worth it to hear what Ali has to share about Range Energy. It's very interesting to look at it from kind of a different perspective of how we can electrify those huge freights and big heavy duty commercial fleets to make an impact and just really see if we can weave through the challenges and find a solution. And anyways, I think it's interesting. Push through my weird voice and please enjoy. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let's now plug in with Ali.
Thanks for having me. I'm in Mountain View, California, just south of San Francisco, a couple minutes.
Great. Is that where Range Energy is headquartered? Where are y'all doing out of all this stuff that we're going to get into the details about?
Yeah, we are based out of Mountain View, California. We were founded here in 2021, and actually, technically, we moved into Mountain View in 2022. Founded in my guest room at my house in 2021.
There you go. There you go. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. Can you tell me what Range Energy is, how it came to be, and then a little bit about yourself and your background? Yeah, the story
Yeah,
of it all.
for sure. I will. I'll start with my background, and it kind of hopefully will explain the story of why range and why trailers of all things. So, I'm about 26 years in the automotive industry as a mechanical engineer. I worked for the first 10 years of my career in motorsport, building race cars for various different teams around the world. And about 16 years ago, I decided to leave the racing industry and join a small startup that was building some electric Lotuses in Redwood City, California, and that turned out to become Tesla Motors. And so I was one of the earlier employees there. Joined in full time in 2008. Built out and ran the vehicle prototyping team, and enjoyed the pleasure of being part of the incredible team that got to bring cars like the Model S and the Model X and Model 3 and of course the Tesla Roadster to the world. In 2012, I decided to leave Tesla once the Model S shipped, and I joined Google. I went there for a few years working on a bunch of different initiatives, including some of the early Firefly stuff, but not exclusive to any of the X programs. And then in 2015, I left Google and joined Zoox, where I got to kind of put a lot of my passions together, which was robots and cars. And it was really, really fun. And we developed some really awesome robots there. And long story short, around 2021, I decided that it was time for me to kind of make my next career move. And as I started to look around to see where I could use the things that I know and the network that I have to kind of help progress our adoption of reduced carbon or lower carbon technologies, eventually getting us to a more clean environment. Commercial vehicles became one of those things that was like, well, there's a lot of attention here, and we know that commercial vehicles have an outsized negative impact on our environment. Well, is it possible for us to build a piece of technology that has an outsized positive impact? And so, uh, fast forward to 2021, I founded Range Energy, and it was kind of a spark of an idea that we even had in the very early days of Tesla about, what happens when we have electric commercial vehicles and what happens to the towing of those electric commercial vehicles. And these were like the early conversations around, how are we going to charge these things? Oh, we should make a supercharger network. So it's like all of the foundational conversations that were being had back then. And the trailers were kind of put aside because we're all focused on shipping cars and all of this stuff. And so fast forward to today, as I started to look around, or 2021, as I started to look around and I saw, great products. You see the Tesla Semi, you see a bunch of different things being presented that may be viable in the future, maybe not immediately, but into the future it would be. And the one thing I noticed that the trailers were just continuously presented as this kind of dead weight box that just needs to be towed around. And for somebody that's been driving trucks and trailers, don't forget I came from the racing industry, so I was towing race cars around my entire life. And so, for somebody that's driven trucks and trailers around a lot, I know the safety aspects, I know the efficiency aspects, and that was just a natural fit for me. And so the idea basically came, which was, what if we gave the trailers their own power to propel? What if we added a full powertrain to the trailer, but have an intelligent control system that is essentially a very fast follower to whatever is towing it? Whether it's an old Peterbilt or a brand new Tesla Semi, it doesn't matter. How can we build a piece of technology that's additive to all of these different pieces? And that was the birth of Range Energy.
Interesting story. I mean, a lot of your background is those big names, which of course, points to your experience, but also we love to see how it really manifests itself. Like, how can you learn from these were, now giants and take that experience and turning it into something where there is a gap? So obviously you saw driving these around yourselves and the potential, like, wait, this isn't just dead space, it's tons of potential.
Yeah.
And I think it's been really cool to see how innovative people are getting with the commercial fleet industry, because you do kind of have to change your perspective to say, okay, that's how we've been doing it, this is the traditional way, this is the way that works really well for what we need, how can I fit something valuable in there? So super interesting.
And I think if
And
I
I
can, sorry,
Yeah.
you said something really important there, which was, typically Silicon Valley folks like myself like to step in and disrupt, right? That's like our title is like we're the disruptors. But I understand that, especially in the commercial industry, especially all of my friends that drive trucks and trailers, they don't want to be disrupted. They want to be safe, they want to be comfortable, and they want to know that they can go home every night and feed their family. And so for us, we have this really cool tagline that's our innovation is driven by empathy. And that connects back to how can we bring this technology to these fleets with minimal disruption, because everything is going to disrupt in some way. But how can we be mindful and empathetic to how the fleets and the drivers work today so that we can bring this technology to them and they just adopt it?
Mhm. And that's an interesting challenge because your goal is to bring something that's more advantageous over what exists while still having it ease in. So it's the balance of, yeah, this is actually a better option, but how do I match it to expectations or just the requirements? So with Range, you offer the powered trailers with the electric assist features. Can you explain how they work and then
Yeah.
maybe the advantages over the traditional trailers?
Yeah, so the range system is relatively straightforward on the surface. It's made of three core elements. We have the e-axle that sits in the rear suspension. So if you visualize a trailer driving down the full size Class 8 18-wheeler driving down the highway, and just kind of isolate that trailer for a moment in your mind. And then if you take the two wheels, the suspension that's in the rear of that trailer, what we do is we actually electrify that forward axle of the trailer. And so there's a diagram up on the screen. If you look at that forward axle, and in fact, forgot we're on video. If you take this forward axle of the suspension and electrify it, that's what we're doing here. And then we add a battery pack underneath the trailer, And then the third element is with this kingpin. The kingpin is the mechanical connection between the tractor and the trailer. Sometimes it's called a trailer hitch. And so what we do is we add intelligence to that kingpin, and now we can measure in real time using physics alone what those interactions are between the tractor and the trailer. And based on a bunch of different algorithms that we lay on top, and we can use tag phrases like machine learning and AI and all of this reinforcement learning, all of this stuff, which is embedded in everything we do. But what we're doing is we're classifying that moment in time where what's the driver trying to get out of the tractor at that moment? Are they trying to go through the intersection? And now can we torque fill in between shifts as they're heading up that hill to make that old tractor feel modern and comfortable and safe? Do they have an electric vehicle? Are they towing with an electric tractor? We can characterize all of these different things, and we specifically provide drive algorithms that make that trailer feel weightless in power and in regen, because we're recapturing all of that kinetic energy at that e-axle in the trailer. And then the net result is that number one, the driver feels like the system is weightless and always in control. Number two, the fleets get an incredible decarbonization solution that's relatively easy to charge. And we'll talk about charging, I'm sure, in a moment. But most importantly, you're starting to double your fuel economy. So I'll give you a piece of anecdotal data on our beta trailer that we brought to ACT, the trailer that you saw on the show floor. We drove that trailer from Bakersfield to Las Vegas with a 2,000 foot net elevation gain and 12,000 total feet climbed. 200 and I think it was 56-mile trip or 280-mile trip, something like that. We got an average from the Freightliner Cascadia, 2022 big block Freightliner sleeper cab Cascadia, 18.1 miles per gallon. And this is doubling the fuel economy of the baseline tractor. Kenworth had all of this really awesome super truck 2 there, and they did all of this amazing work, and we can argue whether or not that's going to actually ship or not. They got 13 miles per gallon, and they were trying really, really hard. We just hooked up to our trailer and got 18. And so that's the net result here, is that not only is the experience for the driver better every day and safer and all of this stuff with things like anti-jackknifing algorithms and things like that, but now the fleet owner is happy too, because we're doubling their fleet's fuel economy. And so the net result is happy in both directions. And now you start to see things where, well, this trailer is actually going to pay itself off. It's not just, credits that we're looking for. It's actually going to pay us back. After just a few years, the trailer starts to finish paying for itself. And now you start seeing money back from that trailer, which is a new thing. And we haven't even started talking about refrigerated trailers yet. So that's a whole other ball of wax that gets opened up in a positive way.
Yeah, definitely. So many questions are coming to mind. Of course, with electrification, there's all these cost saving conversations, but there is the upfront price. Can you tell me a bit more about what it would look like to add one or many of these to my lineup as a fleet
Yeah. So
organizer?
we totally understand that it's not one-to-one tractor trailers on all of these fleets. In fact, nationwide, it's a more of an average of 3-to-1 trailers for every tractor in a fleet. Some fleets like Tesla, it's more like 10-to-1 trailers per tractor. They're using them as mobile warehousing, for example. But what we're doing is we're taking this average 3-to-1 trailer to tractor ratio across the nation, and we're scaling that along with the pricing or the battery size for the fleets, the lanes that the fleets are running, so that we can price this trailer competitively. I'm not able to share the pricing publicly yet. However, it will be incredibly competitive. It will not be this massive sticker shock that we're seeing from the big the tractors. You have to kind of remember that our trailers are only carrying about 200 to 300 kilowatt hours of energy. An e-Cascadia is carrying around 5 to 600 kilowatt hours, and a Tesla e-Semi is even more than that. And so because our battery pack is smaller, because we don't have to deal with cabin air conditioning and windshield wipers and door seals and seat comfort and instrument panels and all of that stuff, our cost to the consumer is dramatically less than if we were putting together an entire vehicle. And we're using the economies of scale on everything. So all the suspension comes from the suppliers that the brakes come from the suppliers that the boxes come from the suppliers that all of this stuff has been commoditized. And the reason that we're able to be so price competitive is that reason alone that we're not building a full vehicle. We're just electrifying your trailer.
Yeah, there's definitely that kind of approach, which is, should we just build this from the bottom up, or should we make what we already have electric? Which is definitely different kind of strategies, and I've seen success both ways. So, I understand that you can't share pricing. That makes sense, but there is a couple different goals for folks who are adopting these. They might be having to bring down their emissions, or maybe they want to electrify internally. Maybe they want to bring down costs over time, whatever it might be. And this is kind of a way, okay, I don't have to invest in the actual tractor, which would have the battery, but instead, I'm kind of seeing it as like a propulsion system. But when it
It
does
is.
come to, I'm sure a lot of, I'm glad I'm thinking about that, right? But the motivation when regulation comes along means that they do have to either bring down emissions or
Mhm.
actually electrify parts of their fleets. So, how does that distinction come in from bringing down emissions with regulation to adding something like this, where technically it makes it more efficient, but it's not exactly making everything electric?
Yeah, so I think that's you struck on probably one of the most interesting kind of sticking points in our entire kind of daily activities here, which is how do we get the credit for the work that we're doing? It's kind of like, imagine you have somebody helping you with your homework and doing all of your work for you, but they never get the credit. And so what we're trying to do here is the challenge that we have, just backing up just one moment, is that electrified trailers is a new concept to the world uh, generally. I mean, obviously there have been examples done in many different domains and things like that. But this is really the first time in North America electrified trailers are coming to the roads, and the regulators have never, frankly, never really even thought about electrified trailers. And so when I go sit in Washington D.C. and go sit with NHTSA or DoD, sorry DOE, DOT, or if I go to California Air Resources Board or South Coast Air Quality Management, just fill in the blanks there. Anybody that you talk to there, they're just like, oh, the trailer was always just something that's in the back. We always thought that the primary mover was what needs to be improved upon. Well, now, and we've been doing that over the last 2 years or so, or about 18 months or so. Now, as you see the future regulations present themselves, you're going to start seeing affordances on everything from carbon credits to weight allowances on complete decarbonization solutions that include the tractor and the trailer. So currently, and the reason that we're confident in this is that we're already seeing movement there. So South Coast Air Quality Management District, California Air Resources Board has the CORE program, which is the Clean Off-Road Equipment program. And they've already recognized our trailer as an off-road stationary storage or power station, and it's an on-road vehicle, all of this stuff, but it's also can be a stationary storage. We have scenarios where there are fleets of smaller electric vehicles charging off of our one trailer out in the field. And so we do qualify there, and now we're starting to see more and more momentum grown, not only around how can I get credit for this, but also how can I get weight allowances, how can I monetize on this, because even if, let's say, I'm the greatest, most powerful, richest fleet in the world, let's just choose one of the large fleets. Let's just choose Amazon or Walmart or Pepsi or something like this, right? Even if they wanted to today, they couldn't get all the e-tractors that they need. They couldn't get all the charging infrastructure that they need. And so a stopgap solution has to be presented. But rather than just thinking of it as a stopgap solution, we wanted to present this idea that we can actually decarbonize today, and we'll get you the credits, we'll get you your money, we'll get all the, like, the core incentive right now is $120,000 per trailer for our system. And that's like a huge indication of the future things to come. So it's early stages. It's going to happen, and we're pushing really, really hard to make it as friendly to the fleets as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely not the first ones to have to lobby for their new product or service or business model to fit into regulation that is totally for a new industry. So that's an interesting challenge that you're taking on. Thanks for giving me some more insight into that. And so I love this. I do want to talk about charging and how this can, be a stationary piece of equipment that serves as a power bank, because that is key when it comes to electric anything is like, oh, there happens to be a giant battery in here that doesn't just have to power movement, but
Yep.
also what these trailers kind of a picture of your ideal customers. So you have the refrigerated trailer and then the dry and the refrigerated, right?
Yep.
So can you tell me a little bit of the difference there because one obviously requires a lot more energy.
That's right. That's right. So, I love these questions, by the way.
Good.
So we
Thank you.
have a recent partnership with Thermo King, who's kind of the what I like to joke around here is that they're the kings of cool, and they have 80% of the market share of the refrigerated market, and essentially, thinking about our trailer not just as a trailer but as a power platform, as you're kind of hinting, the first real tangible example of how we can leverage our technology to provide power as a power platform is the refrigeration unit. So if we take a TRU, this transport refrigeration unit that's kind of scabbed to the front of a big dry van trailer, a refrigerated trailer, there's also generally a 30 to 100 gallon fuel tank that sits underneath that trailer, and generally that thing that's scabbed on the top. So if we look at this image, that bottom band on the front refrigeration unit is typically a diesel engine, and then there's a fuel tank underneath. What we're doing is we're saying no, the refrigeration unit with Thermo King in the future is going to be all electric, and we're going to get rid of, because those things burn about average around 2 to 3 gallons of diesel per hour just sitting idle. And so the nice thing is, because we have that e-axle, so not only can we charge with the onboard battery, which in the refrigerated case is about 300 kilowatt hours, but if the battery runs low and we don't have charging infrastructure, we can actually drag charge this in worst case scenario to keep the goods in the refrigerated trailer alive. So imagine if you have some critical vaccines, but you have some infrastructure problems where all of a sudden you're either not able to charge, or you're in the middle of nowhere, you're not able to refuel, or you're in a region that doesn't allow diesel refrigeration units at all. Like, you're just not allowed to have them. Well, we can actually use this power platform to drag charge the battery pack with that large e-axle. It's 350 kilowatt e-axle, and actually provide power. So that's just one example of using this as a power platform. There are a lot of other ways of using this, mobile command centers with onboard power, recreation. You could Yamaha is one of our Yamaha Ventures has invested in the company in a pretty significant way. There you could imagine deploying one of these trailers out to go have some fun in the middle of the desert, with a smaller version of these trailers to go have fun in the middle of the desert with a bunch of dirt bikes, electric dirt bikes, or come back and charge while you're having lunch. Boats at the lake, boat trailers. So there's a whole bunch of other extensions to this platform itself. The first real flex on that platform are the refrigeration units, which you're speaking about.
Okay, interesting. So not only is it kind of like, well, yes, this use case requires more energy, but also how can we double that for a value add in another
That's right.
situation or in distinct situations?
That's right.
Okay, very interesting. So let's talk about charging and maybe a bit of the specs. So generally, if we're thinking about the trailers, dry or refrigerated, this is going to add efficiency to my setup, right? I'm going to gain, do you have some numbers on the average efficiency added? And then, of course, I'm going to have to charge it. There's region involved, but how am I
Yep.
supposed to power this thing? Especially, if I'm driving a diesel tractor,
Yeah.
how do I match up these?
Yeah. So I'll give you the electric case because it's the easiest to think about, and then we'll dive into the diesel case. So the electric case is essentially, we extend the range of your electric vehicle generally by about 2 to 300 miles, depending on the spec of the trailer and the spec of the electric tractor. That's starting with a full charge, and then at about 2 to 300 miles, we go into a mild hybrid mode, and we're able to capture about 10%. Extend the range further by about a bit more. I think it's about 10 or 15% on an electric vehicle by just recapturing the regen energy in that e-axle, which is cool. This helps folks extend the range, their addressable area with their electric fleets, and it's all great. Even better, though, today on a diesel tractor. So let's say, for example, you have um, a bottling plant. You're a bottling plant in Southern California. You're bottling sodas and you're getting them out to your distribution hubs, plus a few stops at Costco's on your way. And so the way that that will typically work is that they'll be hooked up to a diesel day cab. We will charge overnight. The coolest piece about all of this with the trailer is that the tractor is meant to be moving to make money. It has to be moving. Every time it's parked, it's burning money. Well, the trailer has to be parked to get loaded and unloaded. You're not going to load it like throw things at it. It has to be parked minimum 30 to 45 minutes on a really, really high performing fleet. But typically you're seeing about an hour minimum hook at the dock. And then a lot of times it's overnight. In the case of a bottling distributor, it's generally overnight. Because our battery pack is only about 200 kilowatt hours or 300 kilowatt hours in the maximum form, not a megawatt hour in the maximum form, we can actually use automotive grade DC charging at the loading dock while it's being loaded and unloaded, completely transparent to the fleet. And now, even better, is that all the new warehouses are being mandated to have, especially if they have refrigerated fleets, to have high powered shore power at every loading dock. And our plug interface, not only can it take, the Tesla charging standard or whatever the standards are, choose your connector, but we can also now take the shore power AC in to power all of those units while we're charging our trailer. So charging ends up becoming completely transparent. And if you want to pay the money and do the infrastructure upgrades, you're buying a bunch of 200 kilowatt DC chargers, not 800 kilowatt megawatt DC chargers, and finding the power infrastructure for that. So our charging solution is much more flexible. And now the net result on a diesel tractor, like I said, we're about doubling the fuel economy. Let's say you go from about 9 or 10 miles per gallon up to about 18 or 19 miles per gallon. That's given a 200 to 300-mile range at a full charge. But what happens beyond that? Well, the coolest piece is that the range anxiety thing disappears. In a tractor, if you go beyond the range, you're stuck on the side of the road. And we've all seen scary, or not scary, but unhappy photos of large e-semis being towed back home. Well, the trailer fails as a trailer. It's just like an escalator. If the escalator stops working, you're still walking up the stairs. And so the trailer at the end of the day releases its clutches if it goes into a failure state. And now you have a freewheeling trailer that just weighs a few thousand pounds extra. Our total system is around 4,000 to 5,000 pounds, about 2 pallets worth. But even better, and the last piece I'll say is that even without charging, so a couple of our fleets are doing pilots without charging. Even without charging, they're seeing about 10 to 15% better fuel economy just because we're recapturing regen from that e-axle in the trailer and providing torque where we can to fill shifts, to accelerate off the line, to basically target all of those moments where not only the CO2 emissions can be abated, but more importantly, the particulate emissions, the NOx emissions, all of those harmful particulates. That's where that outsize, CO2, if you cut 50% of your fuel economy or increase by 50, double your fuel economy, you're cutting your CO2 in half. But the NOx actually goes up even further than that because those are the harmful particulates, the black soot that comes out. So we can actually target that even in the low state of charge domain. Sorry, you're
Um,
asking about RA1 versus RB1.
Yes, exactly. So I can imagine like all the research that went in between and the research and development even to just get your first product. But also, I'm curious about any partners you have that you're working with to put these actually out there and get feedback from them so that you can continue to iterate and make changes or improve and also just get real life feedback because there's so many ideas out there,
Yeah.
which is great. I love to see new solutions, but we also love tangible,
Yeah,
real life
it's all about
takeaways.
pragmatism here. Like if it doesn't work, like there's a whole bunch of funny stories about engineers spending too much time looking in the mirror, being too proud of what they can build, and what ends up happening is that scope creep happens. Things get more complicated and more expensive than they need to be, and nobody's happy. And so we're very, very conscious about connecting what we're building every single day to the net effect of what the customer is going to see and need. And I just got on that tangent. I totally forgot the first question that you had.
Well, so basically, right, you
Oh
went
yeah,
from
RA1 versus RB1. I'm sorry, the progression. So
no worries.
basically, we founded the company at the very, very end of 2021. I hired my first team at the beginning of 2022, and within a year, we had built two small scale trailers. This was like a bumper pull trailer and a small kingpin trailer to be towed behind like a Rivian and an F-250. None of us had CDLs. We didn't have a tractor at the time. And so we wanted to do some A/B comparisons with a passive trailer and an active trailer. And then pretty quickly we realized, holy crap, like all of our physics models are actually real in real life. This is actually working. Let's build the big thing. And that's where the idea of RA1 came in. And RA1 is basically an off-the-shelf 53-foot dry van that we took a bunch of electrified components, battery packs, motors, controllers, all of that stuff, just that was readily available off the shelf, and threw something together to build something at full scale. And that was, again, to correlate our engineering models, our physics models, our energy models, things like that. And so that is essentially RA1 is what I call architecturally representative. It has all of the elements and components of what's going to be in our production vehicle, but the components themselves are not actually real. They're just kind of surrogate components that we grabbed from whatever we could. Now, RB1, the reason it's such a big deal is that this is the first time that it's not only architecturally representative, but now we're pulling in those partners that you're talking about. And we see our partners kind of in three different pools, or maybe four different pools. The first partner is our investor. We get a lot of help from our investor. We have a very, very strong board, not one investor, but investors. We have a very strong board, and that's one of our partners. The next partner is the customer, and that customer is who's telling us what they want, right? We don't just say, hey, look at this cool thing we can build here, customer, take it. We wait, we talk to the customer, we spend time with them. The third partner is what we call the upstream supply chain relationships, and this is kind of where you're getting at. Now you have, I'm just going to throw out names. This is not giving any indication of who we're working with or not, but you have all of these folks that are making e-axles. You have all of these folks that are making suspension like Hendrickson. You'll have brake suppliers like Wabco and Bendix. You have box suppliers like, Utility, Wabash, Hyundai, all of these Great Dane, all of these other folks. And so we have strong relationships with everybody in this chain. The customer's telling us what we want. The supply chain then tells us what's possible. And then what we do is we put together a system that we think is going to meet the performance requirements of the customer. And then we take that with the supply chain to the trailer OEM and we say, okay, trailer OEM, our customer, Fleet A, has asked for this kit to be built on a fill in your blank chassis, Great Dane, Hyundai, Wabash Utility, whatever, and fill in your blank. Then we work with one of those trailer OEMs to say, okay, these are the trailers that the customers have ordered. And then we put the whole thing together and deliver that trailer to the customer, generally through the same sales channel, because the element that's tying a lot of this together on the sales and after sales is that we've built a very, very strong nationwide dealer network. And this dealer network are folks that every one of these fleets already buys from, already trusts, and every one of these OEMs already trusts and sells to, and everybody gets their service done at a lot of these different sales partners. And so that's kind of how the pipeline is working. We always start with a customer pilot. The customer engages with us or we engage with them. We do a pilot, usually 1 to 2 weeks long. The data is so significant that it's not in the noise. If we're providing 3 or 5% efficiency, then we would want to see a 1 or 2 month pilot. We want to kind of filter out the noise, but we're showing 40 or 50% increases in fuel economy. And that's seen literally on day one in the first 5 miles of driving. And so we usually do a quick pilot, and then that pilot converts into orders, and then we go from there.
So can you speak to how many of these are out there?
Yeah, so we currently have one RA1 and one RB1. We're a pretty small team. We are currently in the middle of RB2, 3, and 4 builds out in the shop behind the wall that I'm pointing at right there. And so by the end of the year, we will have 5 full-size Class 8 trailers on the road, different configurations. RB1 was a 53-foot dry van. Sorry, RB1 was a 38-foot reefer. RB2 will be I believe that will also be a 48-foot reefer. And then RB3 is a dry van. RB4 is a 53-foot reefer. And so we're doing all of these different configurations to be able to address our first customers' fleets. And then we're going to continue grow that fleet through 2025 and start doing early customer deliveries at the end of 2025 while we're continuing to do pilots. Because there are a lot of trailers out there, and there are a lot of fleets that want this technology to help them decarbonize. And so we have to make sure that we can address as many requests as we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, still developing, collecting all that information. Everything's so new. And I think I even skipped from charging pretty quickly because I did have a question there because I was thinking, oh,
Yeah,
I mean, our charging networks are, you know what they are in the US. And to not have to wait for a megawatt charging system itself to pop up seems like a bit of an advantage if you're able to charge these with, DC fast chargers instead. Is that Was that kind of a something that you specifically went for? I mean, it also doesn't require the
100%.
megawatt charging. Okay.
100%. That was like so critical for us was, you know, I was in the room when some of the first supercharger network conversations were being had, and I led the team that tested the first superchargers out on the I-5 corridor up and down at Tejon Ranch and Harris Ranch, and so I have a lot of very, very, let's say, deep background in deploying some of these large networks, and I know how challenging it can be. And part of that survey that I did early on, looking at the decarbonization of commercial trucking, was the infrastructure side. And I saw a lot of attention and a lot of work being done. But the primary difference between the charging infrastructure challenges in a consumer product versus a fleet product is that generally the fleets, if you can show them that this is going to pay off on a TCO and this is going to minimize disruption, and so on and so forth, then generally they're willing to adopt it, even without ESG like flags and all of this really great stuff that they can share with their shareholders or their customers. And one example of that is that, all of the new loading docks, like for example, um, uh, all the new loading docks are being now provided with power at the loading docks for shore power. And as I started to see a lot of this stuff come up, and I've used shore power myself at my own companies previously for other things, and I knew that there was power there. I knew that we had a small enough battery pack that, like the first fleet that we piloted with, that first night, the charge adapter that we had ordered was delayed by a day. We literally pulled an employee charge cable from the other side of the fence and plugged it into our trailer and just charged off the employee charger overnight, the charge point charger overnight. And the trailer was charged up and ready to deploy the next morning. And so
Hmm.
we wanted to make sure that we had that level of, you can literally charge it off your dryer plug at home if you have a long enough driveway. And so we wanted to make sure that we had that level of flexibility, because we totally understand that there are some brilliant charge networks being built out there. There are also some mediocre charge networks being built. And we don't want to be beholden to what ends up happening in the future of charge networks. And there's so many great concepts out there. I think what's going to end up happening is that each fleet is going to be responsible for their own lanes and the charging within those lanes. They're going to come up with clever solutions. A few kind of themes are going to be kind of adopted nationwide in all of the different fleets, but it's up to those fleets to tell us what they want for charging, and it's up to us to develop a product that just fits in the way that they work and not require them this crazy infrastructure requirement.
Interesting. Yeah, don't reinvent the wheel where you don't have to. But so are you saying there that we're not sure if we're going to see like these trucking depots electrified?
Oh, you'll see the trucking depots electrified. That is happening in a big way. You're going to see trucking depots are going to look very different 20 years from now, 10 years from now, even.
No
Um,
doubt.
and there's going to be some really, really awesome conveniences built into trucking depots and a bunch of stuff like, even with this technology, because we can sense real measurements at the kingpin. We can even see a day where, we've been talking to California Highway Patrol about this and Texas State Troopers about this, but you can see a day where you just get a red light, green light as you're passing a way station. You don't have to stop, right? Because we're measuring the load in real time. We have a real measurement, and we can give an anonymized number out to the regulators as you're driving by the road. Nothing about the driver, nothing about the load, nothing about any of that stuff. It's just a yes, he passes or she passes, or no, they don't pass. Go pull them over or something like that. Very, very simple. And that's only available because we're building this product as a platform.
Hmm, interesting. You touched on something a minute ago, which is kind of the motivations behind who your target market will be. Not necessarily ESG or that kind of goal of bringing down emissions. Some people don't care, but they want to save money, to each their own. As long as I'm breathing cleaner air, whatever, I guess. But regulations are obviously pushing for zero emissions and heavy duty trucking, all kinds of transportation, really. It's such a huge impact. You talked about those particulates, and there's EPA regulation, there's state regulation, there's federal. This is significant for the innovation in this industry and the market demand. So I am curious, really, how critical do you feel that these regulations are to Range's business model? Without these pressures from regulation, would there be less urgency? Would there be less market interest? And then that makes me think, if it goes away or if it changes,
Yeah.
how do you plan to adapt?
Yeah, I mean, exactly that is why we tried to separate ourselves from like tying into incentive programs or regulatory requirements, like making ourselves a requirement or just focusing all of our energy on getting every single incentive possible because those things come and go. And like you said, it's not up to us. It's really up to the global we is what ends up happening there. And a lot of times we don't have control over that. And so for me, I think the regulatory thing is that this isn't the first vehicle we've shipped. This is definitely not the most complicated vehicle we've shipped by a long mile. We did the Model S. This team did the Model S. We did the Model X. We did the Robo Taxi for Zoox. Done a lot of different vehicles in between, and bringing new transportation modalities to the world that has never been on the road before is our game. That is what we do. And so the cool thing about that, and we have a pretty strong. When I went back to the joint office of the DOE and DOT, they knew who I was. They knew that I was the one that brought the Model S to them back in 2010 for them to see it before anybody else in the world saw it. So they have this kind of sense that okay, this team is not just a random startup, and they can, and then we back it up. Most importantly, with data. And we have a significant amount of safety information, of safety data, of functional safety. And essentially, what we're doing is we're building ourselves a technical moat around what we're building so that at some point, when real roadway regulations start to talk about electrified trailers or powered trailers, then we have that safety conversation. We should talk a little bit about safety after this part of it. But the incentive programs and all of that other stuff for me, I think it's really it's about how can we make this make sense without any of that. At the end of the day, if all of this crap goes away and it's just a good old boy, forgive the generalization, but it's a good old boy in Texas that just wants to make a little bit more money or be a little bit more efficient on the road, I want that person to line up at my door. And if I can get that person to line up at my door, then the folks that have consumer ESG pressure, regulatory ESG pressure, whatever internal ESG pressure, whatever that is, then it's just like, oh my gosh, this actually solves my pain point and actually makes me a little bit of money. Then of course. And so that's kind of, I look for like not just product market fit, I look for like extreme product market fit where people are like, I can't not do this. And that's what we're trying to build here.
And I know that we will go into safety next because I do think that obviously is important and something to consider here. But you're talking about like the cost savings, the return on investment with the trailers, and I know that you have like a savings calculator on your
Yep.
website for estimating annual savings. But can you maybe give me a little bit of more color on like based on the average numbers of what you're finding? How many years would it take for a company to like break even? I think they could see benefits right away, but what typically do you think people could expect?
Yeah, so on a typical use case, nationwide average, we're seeing somewhere around 4 to 5 year payback period on the trailer. These trailers typically see, let's say 6 years at the very least, and typically 8 to 12 years in a fleet. And that is looking at somewhere around 40 to 60,000 miles a year utilization. We believe that these trailers are actually going to be seeing a lot more utilization, much more like a reefer. We're talking 80 to 100,000 miles a year. And so that's kind of linear with the payback period. So the payback on the trailer is not this, long drawn out thing where you're dropping $500,000 on a trailer and hoping that it can get some benefit in the future. And I'll give you kind of just a reference point. And so Walmart, Amazon, these folks have fleets of trailers in the 80,000 numbers of 80,000 trailers about. JB Hunt, Covenant, these guys are over 100,000 trailers in their fleets. And let's just take a smaller local fleet. I can't give you the actually I can give you the name because we have a pilot agreement that's public. So Dot Foods, um, I I believe they have around 3,000 trailers, and a fleet that has around 3,000 trailers has somewhere in the ballpark of a 20 to 25 million a month fuel bill. We're cutting 40% out of that right away. That's it, and that's when we switch all the trailers over and all of this stuff, and it's not going to be a light switch. But if you think about that, and now I'll scale it up. There are 300,000 trailers uh, being on the road right now. Sorry, 300,000 trailers a year sold, 3 million trailers on the road right now. And if we took that Dot Foods example and just bumped it up to one of the mega fleets, like a Walmart or an Amazon or something like that, if we were to adopt our technology to 80,000 trailers, not the 3 million that are out there, just 80,000, that's $2 billion of cash savings a year for a fleet and 12 megatons of CO2 that's abated on just one person's fleet. And so you can see the net benefits here. So now it's like ESG pressure is cool or not cool or whatever you want it to be. We're actually helping you make money here.
Mhm. I mean, that's obviously essential. If, people planet profit. If you're
Yeah.
not making people money, then it's not gonna work, which is
I like
everything
to
that we see. So
disguise
it's
my I like to disguise my decarbonization agenda into something that everybody says, "Oh, that tastes good."
of course, yeah, it has to be delicious if we're gonna do any of this, and there's plenty of, I don't know, sour things that
Vitamins.
you have to kind of yeah, yep, you gotta hide your vitamins. Yeah, okay, so plenty of benefits to kind of communicate to the market, especially as you grow. It seems that they're there, and then part of this, of course, is safety. So, uh, these are giant semi trucks, they're
Yep.
tractors, and there's safety concerns. They have substantial weight. They have heavy loads on top of that, and the braking systems. I see runaway ramps and brake checkpoints. And I even talked about this with the guy in the Tesla semi truck when I got to ride in it at the ACT Expo. So, how effective are range trailers in maybe alleviating some of the safety
Yeah.
considerations? I especially think about regenerative braking and maybe like the braking systems and the air brakes working together. Of
Yeah,
course, you're
so
collecting tons of data too, which I think has to probably contribute to safety.
tons and tons of data. So this is like I would say the tip of the iceberg of the safety conversation. We can kind of potentially even have an entire conversation, a podcast just about how we think about safety and what we're doing around safety. But long story short, you are absolutely right. If we think about a tractor trailer on the roadways, they are capped out at 80,000 pounds, and if it's electrified, it's 82,000 pounds. So 80,000 pounds, if you compare, I don't know, let's say if you drive a Mazda 3 that weighs 2,800 pounds, 2,800 pounds versus 80,000 pounds is a bad equation. And so safety is a massive thing. And what's funny is that that box itself can weigh as much as 65,000 of that 80,000 pounds. And so that's the challenge there is that that box has no safety system in it except for a rudimentary 40-year-old piece of technology called Gen 1 ABS. It's like early stage ABS. It works well enough. It definitely has helped add to roadway safety, but it's ABS and it's just an analog signal that goes in and it turns the brakes on and off basically as fast as you can snap your fingers. What we're doing here is we're actually, because we add that E axle and because the E axle is so significantly powerful enough to provide propulsion, we can actually now act as a secondary braking system. And the reason that we can do that is because we can modulate our E axle in regen much, much, much faster than how the ABS could work. And so now what we've been able to do is we can sense a jackknifing moment as it starts to build. We mitigate and correct that before the ABS even has to turn on. And so now we start thinking about, okay, well, now we can help with jackknives. Well, can we take it even further? Well, there's a ton of kinetic energy in a 65,000 pound box. Well, why can't we use the regen axle to brake the system going down a hill? And so now, let's say, for example, you're on a long grade, and the Grapevine, for example, 6% grade, 42 miles for total length, it's 6% in both directions. We were able to do that grade on the downhill without touching the brakes once. We used the Jake brake to slow the vehicle down to 55 miles an hour. Then the trailer used the e-axle to hold the system at speed at 55 miles an hour all the way down that hill and put all of that energy over 10 kilowatt hours back into the battery pack to reclaim that energy. And what that means is the system is safer because it's being held from the back now, not from the front. Remember that. So now jackknifing, fishtailing, all of that stuff kind of gets mitigated to a certain extent, but much more safer, much more safe than it was before. But the tractor never had to touch its brakes on that hill. And so now the tractor has fresh brakes in case some car cuts it off or it has to do an evasive maneuver. And that tractor driver is not begging for clearance to the runaway truck ramp anymore. The Grapevine has like 6 runaway truck ramps on each side. And so now they don't even have to do that. So our driver loves going down big hills because they know when they get to the bottom of that hill, their brakes are cold and ready to go in case they have an emergency maneuver. But even better, no harmful NOx emissions, no harmful brake particulates. Don't forget about that stuff. I'm obsessed about all of this crap, by the way. There's the brake particulates that are coming off of our brake pads. That's where a lot of these microplastics and micro materials are getting into our water runoff. They don't even touch the brakes on the downhill. We put all that energy back into the battery pack. So safety is we're just starting to talk about the safety stuff. We're going to have really cool videos this year to share with the world. And I believe that on top of all of this efficiency stuff, safety is going to be one of the biggest drivers for fleets to bring this technology into their fleet.
I mean, obviously, yeah, all the even the microplastic parts of this, which is significant. And I think I see that in a lot of founders, especially, but it's so important to know all of the moving parts and think about it so holistically that even more holistically than you think. I think especially if you're trying to find a way to find a solution in an industry that is so important to our GDP. I mean, like it's our huge economy, and we've seen it electrify. But how are you going to fit in? Because you mentioned, Amazon and Walmart, and there's all these fleets that are electrifying their vans in a lot of ways. 4D Transit, Ram ProMaster, the Rivian EDV. Love to see it taking it a step further. It's we're people, there's some companies that are putting out megawatt chargers, and they're like, we're just waiting for the semis if they would come
Yeah.
along. So finding this non-band-aid solution, because I think you said that in the beginning too, like there's this space to create in betweens here while we're in the transition. But I'm like, why waste the
Imagine you
band-aid
have
here?
if you have 1 megawatt charging drop, you can charge 4 of our trailers off of that 1 megawatt charging drop.
Mhm.
And that's like a 45-minute charge, right? If you cut it down to 100 kilowatts, for example, you can charge 8 of our trailers in 2 hours. And so the infrastructure, we're trying to stretch the infrastructure here because we understand that yes, some folks have installed megawatt chargers, but they may only have like 4. Well, we can do so much with just that 4 megawatts of power sitting there.
And we're also waiting for a lot of power to become available. We talk
Yep.
about utilities all the time and actually what stands in the way in putting in infrastructure. So to be able to utilize what we have, I think is important while we can drive innovation. And I do care about those particulates, I gotta say. But
Yeah.
also, yeah, it's a challenge. So you've talked about kind of your approach to market, your runway to get things going, your delivery dates, end of next year, and stuff like that. So, what do you see as the most significant challenges and opportunities as we move towards the fully electrified, maybe not fully, commercial vehicle sector from what you've gathered so far, looking big?
Yeah, it's funny. I'll connect this question with what you just said about the utilities. In fact, I think the utilities may be our biggest fans anywhere. I presented to a bunch of the nationwide utilities in Manhattan a couple months ago, and the response that I got from every local and regional utility district was just incredible. They're just like, "This is the pressure relief we needed." Uh, but anyways, so the challenges and significant kind of bits and pieces. I think we are at the stage now where we have proven the technology, we have proven product market fit, and it's time to now hunker down and start to scale. This is, make sure that we cross our T's and dot all the I's, make sure that we're sharing the information that we can and we should with our partners, with the fleets, with the regulators, and basically just growing this this idea into mass product and into scaling it up, going through the production hell that everybody has to go through, and all of that other stuff. I think technical challenges really just lie around making sure that we have a fulfillment pipeline from component to build to deployment that is something that kind of works for all of the different partners in the chain, especially the fleets. And so we're still learning how the fleets want to buy these things and how they want to use them. And we still have a lot of work to do on getting those trailers out there with multiple millions of miles on them and doing the durability cycles, and all of that stuff is happening in parallel. It's really around just the standard kind of scaling stuff. We're in a very, very lucky position to where we have good interest from investors, great partners, and we're not inventing anything here. We're putting together a lot of really great pieces of technology into a form factor that we all know and trust every single day, whether you know it or not. And we're just trying to make it better. And so we don't have to wait to de-risk some piece of chemistry or some piece of physics or some other thing. We're just putting the best of what's out there together. And when that gets better next year, when energy densities go up, when charge cycles go up, when all of this other stuff gets better, we just adopt that new piece into our stack.
That makes me think of battery chemistry, which I'd love to just hit on before we wrap up. But what are the batteries that you're looking at to power these? These are bigger than the ones we have in our EVs that we drive around town. So, are you looking at specific chemistries? Are you looking at specifically? I mean, also we have the issue of making them abroad or making them
Yep.
here, and we're not
Yeah,
super
yeah.
great at making them here.
So, fortunately, like I said, the team has a lot of experience even building battery factories. We are not interested in vertically integrating our own battery factory. However, we do have some really, really strong partners that are going to be producing all of our goods domestically. Our goal is to be 100% domestic production and manufacturing. Sorry, the first part of the question.
I guess I just asked about the batteries. Yeah, like
Oh yeah, the battery
where in
chemistry.
the
So
chemistries.
yeah, so we are chemistry agnostic. Depending on the use case and the energy profiles, we will choose a couple of different chemistries. Primarily, right now, our first trailers are being built off of LFP, and the reason that we're doing that is because of the ease of getting the materials and all of the base components, but also we're not constrained for packaging. We're basically putting the battery outside under the box.
Mhm.
LFP is more thermally stable. LFP has a lot more charge cycle flexibility so that we don't have to worry about this thing not being able to charge up to 80 or 90 or 100% 5 years from now. So currently we're looking at, or we're shipping with LFP, but we are chemistry agnostic, and that could change
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah, I would think that that would be a favorable chemistry right now because you can kind of, as we say, like beat them up,
Yep.
those batteries. And
Yep.
I'm sure that they'll see a lot of charging and intense charging. And yeah, I have, read about the more thermal stability, but they are more sensitive to the cold. So
Yep. We have
whatever.
thermal management on the pack, so we do work in all of the different temperature domains, and we have a lot of different sophistication in the battery health management, so that we can make sure that those things do last that 10,000 charge cycles or more, and all of that stuff. And I think the other little element of LFP is that it's pretty friendly. It's more friendly to the earth than some of the other chemistries as well. And so we're paying attention to that. We're also looking at the end of life. How much easier is LFP or some other chemistry to recycle than others? And so there are
Mhm.
other, battery recycling giants that are being born today, that we're already in conversations with and talking to.
Great. Yeah, great to hear it. I love to think of the life cycle because those are huge arguing points too with
Everything counts.
electrification.
Everything
Everything
counts.
counts. I appreciate your approach there, and I appreciate I've taken way too much of your time, Ollie. Your time and your energy today, learning about range and what you're doing here, and what we can expect to see. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Cool. I had a good time.
Of course, and y'all can listeners let us know what interested you about this conversation because there were many moving parts, and we interview a lot of companies that are creating right from the ground up. So would love to hear what maybe questions you have remaining, what other segments of this conversation we could dive into deeper in the future, either with Ali or another guest. But yes, thank you, Ali, so much for your time today. You can find range and all the information at range.energy. I'm pretty sure is your website.
Yep,
And dive in there. Yeah, hope to see y'all in person again soon, maybe at another event and hopefully rolling on the roads
for
sometime
sure.
sooner than that.
All
Yeah.
right.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of the Out of Spec podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.